what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
This episode of The Forecast is sponsored by Clinic Drug, located in Morganton, North Carolina, and serving the surrounding community since 1938. Clinic Drug has a large selection of Nature's Bounty vitamins, Briar Lane Home and Garden flags, Russell Stover's candies, and Thai stuffed animals. Clinic Drug offers free delivery and 24/7 unparalleled service. Clinic Drug turns no patient away. For more information, call them at 828-584-0741, or you can find them on Facebook or go to their website, www.clinicdrug.com. Your health is our priority at Clinic Drug.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Forecast. We are your connection to the who's who in the game of golf. We hope to make you laugh, learn to win, as well as grow your golf IQ. I'm your host, Allen Burton, Director of Instruction for the Allen Burton Golf Academy at Lake Hickory Country Club in Hickory, North Carolina. I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in, as well as our sponsors. Find us on themesh.tv and find all your other favorite podcasts from themesh.tv as well on all the platforms that you use for your podcast connections. It's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. Be sure to check all the other shows out here on themesh.tv, all produced right here in Western North Carolina. Hey, listen, advertising on the Mesh Podcast Network is a low-cost way to reach a targeted audience. For more information on advertising on this show or other shows on the Mesh Network, you can send an email to info@themesh.tv or by visiting the Mesh website at www.themesh.tv and clicking on the Advertise button. This morning, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, a fellow instructor here that is becoming a very well-known instructor here in the last several years in our industry, and he's a PGA professional. He's a Jacksonville, Florida resident at the moment, a former Campbell University graduate, and a very intelligent young instructor. I'm excited to chat with him this morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. His name is TJ Yeaton. TJ, good morning, buddy. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Things have been a little bit unusual here for us in the world in the last 60 to 90 days. Are things kind of leveling out for you down there in Jacksonville? Are you back out in front of people in person at this point? Or tell me what's going on.
Yeah, so things are definitely moving in the right direction. We the club I'm at, Atlantic Beach Country Club, we shut down for play and business. We basically shut down completely. Just shortly after the Players Championship, which is just down the road in Ponte Vedra. And so I was at home for about 4 weeks before even going into the golf club. And then around mid to late April, we opened up back for member play. And over the last 4 weeks or so, we've started creeping back in towards normalcy. I got back to the lesson tee last week. So I hadn't given an in-person golf lesson in about 4 weeks. And I just got back to teaching last week.
Yeah, it's been a definite alteration in how we operate, and I know for myself, very similar situation, maybe just a few weeks more than that. But you've always used technology, so you probably fell very comfortable into video analyzation of students, and working remotely is probably something you're very comfortable with, I would assume. Tell me how you adapted to that situation, and what tools did you utilize primarily?
Yeah, sure. So, ironically enough, even being an early adopter of technology, I hadn't moved into the online side until we closed as a golf club. So, I've always had students, all over the place, and always had, somewhat of an informal way of communicating with those students, such as, just text message and occasionally a FaceTime. Mostly they just shoot me over some video, and I would just send them a message back, or maybe shoot them a short video. But when this whole thing started, you kind of, for me, I've never gone longer than 3 days without giving an in-person golf lesson. So all of a sudden be faced indefinitely without being face to face with somebody, it kind of gave me pause, and made me reflect on what could I do and what have I missed out on over the past few years as far as getting into the online side of it. And so when this whole thing started, I ended up getting into doing some Zoom stuff, doing some online lesson stuff using a couple different platforms, Skillist, and then got involved with Course Kings there. Really, it just, kind of forced me to pivot into a little bit of a different direction. I think, it kind of forced us all to, in the instruction side to get a little bit more creative and find some various ways to stay in touch and communicate with students and, try to keep the interest in golf going.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. I know you sound like you're very similar to me in that I like being face-to-face with my golf students, with my clients. I don't think there's a replacement for a human connection and being in the same physical space as your client and developing what I think is a very important relationship. There's a big part of it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, or really since I got more and more into teaching and the coaching side of it, is realizing that we're more in the people business than the dissemination of information business. And for me, that was kind of a fundamental shift in thinking as far as how I interacted with a student, and really when I took that side of it and realized we're more about dealing with people, it was actually kind of a shift for me to get away from potentially doing anything online. I didn't do a whole lot of video content. I didn't do online lessons like I mentioned before, simply because I didn't feel like that was the direction I wanted to pursue. I like the face-ons, the one-to-ones, the small groups, the golf schools. It was about being face-to-face, like you said, and I really enjoyed being around people. I think that's a big reason for me to pursue teaching, and kind of why I got into it in the first place.
Yeah.
So being around people for me, being one-on-one with people was a huge influencer for me to kind of go that route.
Yeah, one of my most despised terms of 2020 is social distancing. I think it's such a disservice to the human race to even say that. I think we are social creatures as humans, and I think you're right. We are in the people business and developing relationships with our clients. I mean, being in person, you can read the body language of your student. You can understand if they're stressed. You can understand if they're comfortable. It's our job as coaches to read that and to feel if that student's comfortable or not. It's difficult to do that through a text. Sometimes the texts are the most misunderstood forms of communication that we utilize, and you got to be very careful with text so that they're not. So I think that's a challenge for us when we're taking one of our very significant and important skills away from us as humans, and that's to connect. It's difficult. So, it's been a challenge, but I'm glad we're kind of breaking on the other side of it for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, so with things down in Jacksonville getting back to normal, kind of give us an idea of how your day might go and what type of golfers you see predominantly. I know you work with a number of really, really talented professional golfers. Tell us about some of those and just kind of give us an idea who your student base is.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate that I get to teach all range of players. And as long as I get to do this, I hope to continue to do that. I teach everybody from the very high handicapper down to very recognizable names on the PGA Tour. And really my days pre-pandemic would literally range from teaching a tour player to teaching a 30 handicap and everything in between. I mean, literally in back-to-back sessions would have, wildly differing, abilities between players. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, during the pandemic, my days are a little bit different. I was very fortunate that, my golf club, Atlantic Beach Country Club, came to me and said, hey, we're closing. We're not going to be able to let anybody, teach as far as any of the professional staff goes. And we know that's kind of what you do solely. Would you mind taking a small role in the operations side until we can get back going? For me, I've never not had a job. It's been probably 22 years since I've hadn't held a position where I was working, and for me, given that opportunity, was very exciting. I've been in an operational role in a golf facility in 15 years. So fortunately, they let me start, so I got to be on the first hole, and I got to see members and talk to members and engage with members, and really everything I love about teaching. They kind of allowed me to be in a role where I could continue to be around people. So I would literally do that for 6 hours a day, about 6 days a week. And then once we opened up for teaching again, I'm still doing that until we can get another body in as far as an assistant professional goes in June. So right now my days are 6 days a week, 12 hours a day at the club, doing about 6 hours of starting and then 6 hours teaching.
Yeah, long days for sure for the golf professional. Well, that's a really good opportunity for you as an instructor to probably meet some of the members that you don't normally encounter and develop relationships and kind of create opportunity for them and for you. So that's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah. Much
better than being in the shop, in my opinion, and inventorying golf balls or folding some sweaters. I think.
Yeah, I was never very good at that anyway.
Well,
pretty terrible club pro.
I respect the golf pros that do that. I've known some really and worked for and with some very, very talented golf professionals, and that's what this job does require is a variety of skills. I see the guys that could go from doing perfect calligraphy on a scoreboard to running a tournament and managing entries and inventory and merchandising and cart fleet management. It's just an amazing number of skills. And I realized a long time ago where I enjoyed the most was being out there trying to help somebody play a little better and enjoy the game from a playing standpoint. And thank goodness there's differences in our industry, with the way people approach their careers. That's good. So I had no idea you had been in the golf profession that long because, quite honestly, you're kind of like Preston Combs. You just don't look as old as you are. So take us back a little bit. I know, you are a Campbell graduate. You spent some time there gaining your golf knowledge, and some of it I'm sure came way before that and certainly after. But tell us about where things started for you. Where'd you grow up, and at what age did you become a golfer, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of Boston, kind of in southern New Hampshire, and just west of the city, kind of the Framingham, Natick area when I was very young. And I grew up in southern New Hampshire, went to school in southern New Hampshire, and I was kind of a medium fish in a small pond as far as golfing goes. I kind of got in the game late. I was a really good athlete. I played baseball, basketball, soccer, and soccer was kind of my best sport, so to speak. I didn't start golfing until I was about 13, 14. My dad had played soccer in college. I was playing competitively at very high levels, and that was kind of direction I thought I would go. And my parents stuck me in this golf camp one summer because in the Northeast, there's really no sports going on in the summer. And I kind of went kicking and screaming. And, I remember I couldn't break 100 at the time, and I came back after that summer and said, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. It's fantastic.
Wow.
Still couldn't break 100, but that following fall, I made the golf team, which we were terrible. So it was maybe a good thing that I made it because I don't know if I would have pursued it any further if I hadn't. And by the time I was a senior, I was pretty good. I was around scratch, relatively good. I get around even. I won a bunch of junior tournaments in the Northeast and played with some really good players. I wanted to play in college, and my options were, go Division II or Division III in the Northeast. I, had aspirations of playing Division I golf in the South, and I despised winters and couldn't wait to get out of there. I didn't, do anything in the winter as far as skiing, snowboarding, playing hockey.
Yeah.
So I went to Campbell with the hope to walk onto the team, but was also intrigued by the idea of having, getting in the golf management program as a backup. I got there, I realized I certainly wasn't going to be good enough to, pursue playing long term. So, I'd always been fascinated with learning the game. And, I was obsessed by the time I was 16, 17 years old, trying to figure out how things worked. And I had every book and DVD, written by Jim McLean and David Ledbetter and Butch Harmon, and just anybody that was recognizable in the instruction side of it at the time, just trying to learn and, I went to Campbell thinking I had an idea or a clue as to, how to make golf swings better and how to swing the club. And, then I ran a David Orr, who just shattered my thinking there. And, David was actually my college advisor.
Yep.
And at the time, David was a full swing teacher. He wasn't into the short game putting side, right? I mean, he was in the full swing, and I started hanging out with David. I was lucky enough to be his assistant for the 3 years. 3 years I was there, 4 years I was there. His assistant last 3 years I was there. And David introduced me at first to the golfing machine, right? A book that I had no idea. It was kind of the first attempt of organizing information, as far as technique and mechanics was concerned, and tried to apply some science to the golf swing. So I got really into the golfing machine. That first year I was at Campbell, I actually went out to Portland, Oregon, and did the certifications with Joe Daniels, the owner of the golfing machine.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember coming back in my last day of my freshman year. I was hitting golf balls on the range, and David's house is right there on the back of the range. And, David ran to me and said, well, it's cool that you learned golf machine, but next year I'll talk to you about Morad. And he walked away. and I remember sitting there on the range, and, Morad being the Mac O'Grady, information and his way of teaching. I remember sitting there thinking, like, what the hell is Morad, and why hasn't he mentioned it until now? And how do I learn more about this? Mm-hmm. So being around David, I got very early, 18 years old, introduced to the golfing machine, and then I got introduced to Mac O'Grady, and I spent 5 years working with Mac O'Grady, and just being around Mac O'Grady and meeting all the other teachers that were going through the same level of education I was, it put me in touch with basically a who's who of golf instructors. And from there it was into the technology side, because a lot of those golf instructors that were into the golfing machine and into working with Mac O'Grady were also early adopters of technology. So by the time I was 20, 21 years old, I had been exposed to the highest level of information that you could possibly be around at that time.
Right.
And from there, it just kind of springboarded me into teaching.
Well, that's really interesting. I think with, an opportunity to be around people like David and Mac O'Grady and those types of people, at that young of an age is pretty special, because that's not always the case. But in today's world, we have that information more available than ever. I'm much older than you, and I think it was difficult for me early in my quest to become a golf coach or golf teacher to find that type of information. But I think as coaches, we all become students pretty early in our career, and our interest and our passion takes us down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and there's a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of digging.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going. So that's the fun thing about this industry, I think, is there's so much to know and so much to learn, and so many bright people in this business that are driving information every day and turning new pages, and hopefully to help golfers. And we're accused, a lot of us are accused of being over technical and trying to make it more difficult for the golfer. But what's your take on this, and how do you deal with it? And kind of give us your perspective on how you discern science from fiction, or what does a golfer need to understand about their golf club from the scientific aspects that are going to make them better?
Yeah, in short, not much.
Yeah.
Not much. I never really understood this argument about, being overly technical as far as, what we can learn from an instructor side. I understand it, when you're talking about teaching and coaching a student in front of you who doesn't need to have a high level of understanding. They need to have some basic level of understanding, because they need to understand to a small extent, at the very least, why is this happening, and how can I make adjustments, and how can I self-coach, when I don't have, Allen or TJ standing right there. So I think it's really important for the player to have a functional understanding of what it is they do. But as far as the coaching side of it goes, what's the alternative to not knowing, right? You're just guessing at that point, right? And fortunately, we have so much information, good information, practical information that can help coaches. I don't understand, why somebody wouldn't want to learn more about it. I think personally, and, I could be wrong, but I think people are just a little bit afraid. They're a little intimidated.
Sure.
I think for a long time in this industry, good players were the teachers and the coaches, and they just tried to articulate what it is they did and what they felt. And that may help some, and it's probably not going to help most. But it's somewhat of a guess at best. And that's what I got tired of as a player is I didn't want to have somebody give me their best guess and what they did. I don't want to know what they felt and what they thought. I wanted to know how does this work and how can I best help anybody that's in front of me, not just a player that, is a good player, a bad player, or high IQ golfer, low IQ golfer. I mean, I wanted to help the full spectrum of players. And I think, we're in a great era where technology is now more affordable. It's more attainable. The information is more attainable. It's you just scour the internet and find a very simple explanation about a very complicated subject. So I don't think there's any excuse anymore for, coaches or players to be intimidated about it. From the playing side, you need to know as a player what it is that you do at the very least, and, how to self-coach yourself. So when you're out playing, you can be able to understand what's happening and then how to make adjustments on the go.
That's right. As a coach, a lot of times I find myself explaining to my student that Goldilocks was an LPGA Hall of Fame golfer. And my story begins after the little incident that she had with the 3 bears. She took up golf. And I want my student to understand why Goldilocks became a Hall of Fame golfer is that she understood the concept of too much, not enough. And the reason she became a Hall of Fame golfer was because she never gave up until she found what was just right.
Sure.
And so that concept, as I print that in their mind early, is their blueprint, so to speak, for adjustment. And they, like you said, the golfer needs to know what they do, what they tend to do, and on which side of the error they are. And a lot of times it can be that simple.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's our key, way to do it is communicate to them. Yeah, you're under, you need to be over. You're weak, you need to be strong. Your ball position is too far forward, it needs to be further back. It's too far back, it needs to be further forward. I mean, how many times do we stand on the lesson tee and give an opposite lesson in succession lessons? I was just telling this guy over here, he's, to put his ball more forward in his stance. Just the next person, I'm telling them to put it further back in their stance, whatever it is, right? So it's always,
absolutely.
It's what we're doing, and just guiding players to some neutral zone where they can halfway perform instinctively and repetitively and simplistically, and find their ball in the short grass. So, it's oversimplification of it for sure. But sometimes that's the way it goes. Hey, listen, let's oversimplify your health control, and let's look at our sponsor very closely. I'm a good friend with Jeff Sarkowski, and I want to mention to you, if you have issues with your health and you need medications or treatments, and I know you have doctors who can help you with that, but if you need to get medications or anything that help you with your health, go see the folks at Clinic Drug. Jeff's an amazing guy. He's a pharmacist there. He runs the place. And if you really want to get what's right for you, he helps the community in Morganton, and his Clinic Drug is the place to go. So go see Clinic Drug because your health is their priority. Thanks again to our sponsor. Amazing guy. Listen, TJ, I think when we see golfers on the range and we're trying to teach them how to improve their technique, but also we're trying to teach them how to practice better. How many times do we go out there and watch them, diligently bang balls on the range and, fruitlessly sometimes they're complaining, hey, look, man, I hit it pretty good on the range, but I just can't take it to the course. Let's talk to our listeners about how you might coach a player to some better practice habits. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I think one thing that I've experienced as a coach, especially, in my development, and as I spend more time working with, the tour player, but also the club player, is for the club player, one concept that I'm continuously talking about is learning how to learn. So, the club player is probably never going to be, that highly skilled golfer at the tour level, but they can still do things to get better the same way that a tour player does things to get better. So, as far as when I'm coaching club players, I spend a lot of time, I would say upwards of 80, 90% of the actual lesson, with only a very small portion of that lesson given to some technical information, is explaining to that player how to then implement change, right? How to go about implementing change. And what I do is I run these coaching programs that are comprised of a technical session or a private lesson, would be commonly in the golf industry known as, right? Private lesson, supervised practices, and then also an on-course component. So, for my students in these coaching programs, the technical lessons are a little bit of technical information, but more so how to train and how to implement those changes into their swing. Because as you mentioned, right, we know that the range is a pretty safe environment when the course is a very chaotic environment. So we tend to regress back to normal movements, right? Things that we've conditioned ourselves to do in very dangerous environments, right? Water, OB, force carries into the wind. I use supervised practices as a way to just observe players practice, and then every once in a while insert myself and say, hey, maybe you should look at taking this 30 minutes or 20 minutes, however much time you have per week, dedicated to practicing to do it in this fashion, this way. And we do a lot of skill development in those sessions, and then it's about taking that student on course and actually watching them and observing them in that very chaotic environment and see what they do and how they react and how they go about making decisions and club selection and target selection. And, so for me, it's this very holistic approach to getting golfers to understand, number one, how to actually implement a technical change, because I think most golfers at any level don't do that correctly. Then how to practice their skill development in a safe, observed environment, and then actually take it to the golf course. So that would kind of be my pitch as to how to develop a complete golfer.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how many golfers are just absolutely unaware of the massive difference the practice facility environment is compared to the environment of playing on a golf course in terms of variability. Just in the lie, their unlevelness of the situation when they're playing on the golf course compared to the levelness of the situation when they're on the range, and it fascinates me that they're just unaware of that. And you bring that to their attention, and they're like, "Wow, I've never thought about that." I said, "How many times have you hit 37 irons in a row on a driving range?" Well, a lot. How many times have you hit 37 irons in a row on a golf course? Well, never. That kind of concept, and it's like, wow. So to me, that's a revolutionary thing for a lot of golfers to discover. They're not practicing in order to become great players on the course.
Right.
And I love what you said about testing their ability to execute, in that chaotic environment. You might have a golfer come to you and on the range, and they're saying, man, I am fading this driver more than I want. I want to see my driver draw. And you watch their TrackMan numbers, and you see a 7-degree to the left path, and you say, well, we're not going to be effective drawing the golf ball with a 7-degree to the left path. So you want to draw the ball. So we're going to start working on getting that path to move more to the right. And until we can see that thing get to the right of your club face, we're not in Drawsville, right? And then when you get them to do that, maybe you have to shift their alignment to the right to get the baseline of their path going to the right enough to even hit a draw on the range, and they hit 2 draws out of the next 20 balls. You take that golfer to the golf course and have them hit a tee shot on a hole where there's a water hazard down the right side and say, now draw it off that water hazard.
No chance.
No chance.
Not happening.
Emotionally, they're not going to align their baseline to the right enough because of the water hazard. And, it's just a fear that the golfer doesn't tend to have on the range, and it shows up on the golf course. And that's what we're dealing with in the human mind. So I think it's fascinating as coaches how we can get players over those hurdles of understanding the technical requirements to hit a certain golf shot, and then getting them to understand how to implement their techniques on the golf course, even when those fear factors exist.
Right.
Yeah, that's the brilliance of us. Sometimes it's just saying, man, here's where you are, here's where you want to go, and to get there on the course is a long journey. And let's get there, but let's understand it's not going to happen in a 1 hour golf lesson, is it?
No. And, I try to be really diligent in laying out ahead of time with students, students that, whether it's a tour player or whether it's a, high handicap beginning golf or whatever it is, I'm trying to be very diligent and very honest about the process that player will go through to be able to achieve what it is they're trying to do. And, I'm very upfront with players and say, look, this is not an easy task. And I think as an industry, we've tried to sell golfers on easy fixes. And if you just do this one little thing, it'll solve all your issues. So if you just had this driver, it would solve all your issues. Mm-hmm. But I actually take, quite a bit of time when a student reaches out to me about participating in a coaching program, or maybe it's a tour player who's wanting to, try to better their games. I'm very upfront and say, look, this is a process. This is going to take time. Here's what this is going to look like. Here are some, some performance outcomes we're looking to achieve in, this time and this time. And, maybe down the road, here's where we'll be. And here's ultimately what your goal is. And how does that kind of fit within this time frame of, whatever it is you have to devote to doing this. I try to just lay it out for them and be, very brutally honest. This is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, change is hard, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of discipline and dedication for players. And recreational players generally, number one, they don't have the time. They're busy. They have more than one activity, and we understand that as coaches. So that's why we're able to help these players say, look, it can be done, but your expectations oftentimes as a student might be a little high, and we need to manage that so that they don't get frustrated and they don't quit and they don't give up, and there's so much of that. So I think that's the thing we're dealing with, trying to manage their expectations a lot of times. I mean, how many times have you gotten a golf student on the putting green and they say, well, Coach, I'm not putting very well. I'm not making enough 10-footers. You say, well, let's give you a question to see what your thoughts are. If you played golf and you're a really good ball striker and you had, let's say you hit 10 greens in regulation and you were awesome that day and you had 10 foot and in 10 times in your round. Every green you hit it inside of 10 feet or at 10 feet. How many did you make? And they'd say, maybe 3 or 4. You say, well, yeah, that's pretty close to the PGA Tour average. Right. And they go, what? Yeah, you're putting pretty good, man. 4 out of 10 is the PGA Tour average. So, again, they just don't know the statistics to understand what good is.
Right.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Why is the golfer's expectation so high? The recreational golfer in particular is so high. What do you think causes that high expectation?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, we've been desensitized to the difficulty of the game through TV coverage, right? So TV is only ever showing these long 30-footers that are dropping, and in a 5-minute stretch, you might see 4 or 5 30-footers in a row being made.
Sure.
And then, of course, they're only showing the good shots, right? So they're seeing players, hitting these darts with their irons and wedges to, tap in range. And they're seeing every drive that's hitting the fairway. They're not showing you the guy that just lipped out the 4-footer for bogey, right? Who's in 57th place, right? So first of all, I think there's an expectation of, being desensitized to what we're seeing on TV. The second thing is when we are at the club and playing with players that are better than us, it oftentimes looks very easy and very effortless, right? We think that golf in general is not a difficult game on the surface, right? The ball's not moving. No one's trying to hit you.
Right.
It's not doing anything to make a swing. We see better players do it, and there's this appearance of being effortless, and there's this appearance of being easy. Then we try to do it, and of course, we're experiencing very difficult thing to do. Yeah. And I even find this at the tour level too, right? I mean, I've had tour players that, and by the way, they're not any different than club golfers. They're just doing it at a different level.
Yeah.
I'll have tour players that are playing with somebody who has a strength that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing they're finding is their weaknesses in everybody else's strengths.
Right.
So I had one player last year who, played around with a golfer who made a lot of putts. And then, all I hear is, well, so-and-so makes everything. Well, it's not the reality, but that's he's looking at it through his lens,
right,
of not making enough putts. Right now, he was putting average. He wasn't good or bad, but
sure.
He was just experiencing playing with someone who was kind of a statistical anomaly for a moment.
Yeah, the tour players, they get that one round with that player that was hot that day, and all of a sudden he makes everything. Well, he did that day.
Right.
He shot 63 that day. Well, he hadn't shot 63 in 9 months. I mean,
right.
He was having his great round. Yeah.
Yeah, we followed it up with a 74 the next day and made nothing.
Exactly. But he wasn't paired with them because they shot different scores and got repaired.
Of course.
Yeah, and that's what you're dealing with. And, I mean, with all the statistical data that's available, certainly at the PGA Tour level with strokes gained, putting, and are the players that you coach, are they looking deeper into this information to really understand that and help adjust, or do you have to do that with them?
It depends on it depends on the player. I've got players that are highly analytical and delve deep into their statistics and ask very high-level sophisticated questions about their statistics. And I have players that don't look at them at all, or maybe we'll just look at a specific category that they're trying to improve.
Yeah.
So as a coach, right, you wear many hats, and one of the hats I'll wear with club players and tour players is the statistician, and go through rounds and quarters and months and years looking at statistics with these players and trying to help them sift through and there's a lot of them, right? So try to help them sift through what's important, what's not, what's relevant to their game, what isn't.
Right.
And then again, just like you said, kind of shaping their expectation to where do you need to be, right? You might have a ball striker who hits it 1,000,000 miles, but is producing a pattern that is not great for hitting a soft pitch shot, right? So you often see guys that hit it far are not typically great wedge players because those patterns for hitting a soft wedge and hitting a drive 300 yards are very different.
Mm-hmm.
So you might need to help that player understand, look, if you're just average in this category, you're going to be really, really great. You don't need to be number one, or you need to be in the top 10. You just need to be a little bit better and just be average. Be an average wedge player, and then ball strike it to death.
Now, that's a great way to look at it because it's oftentimes the golfer who does hit it 320 yards off the tee that on a relatively short golf course, he's going to have a lot of soft pitches into those par fours. He's not going to convert a lot of birdies as a result of his weakness in that category of his game. So, yeah, that's a very good way to look at it. So you've, your talents as a coach and a teacher have brought the attention of a team of instructors. They've brought you on board to be part of this new organization called the Course Kings. That's started by Jeff Smith out in Las Vegas, another good buddy of mine. He's brought you on board. Tell me how that relationship took place and you coming to their team as an instructor. What opportunity has that created for you?
Yeah, so Jeff actually, I've known Jeff a long time now, and Jeff approached me a couple years ago and said, hey, I'm looking at doing this online platform. I think there's a need in the industry. There's obviously a lot of information being put out on the internet, but it's hard for the average consumer to sift through and find what was good, what wasn't good, what applied to them, what didn't apply to them. Jeff had this great idea to organize it somewhat in a masterclass fashion, and present it in a very simple, understandable, affordable way for the average consumer. Mm-hmm. And so he asked me a couple years ago about this idea, this project that he had. And I said, look, Jeff, I think it's a great idea, but at the time I was doing, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, lessons and playing lessons and practices, and I didn't feel like I had time to do this. And to be honest, I didn't feel like this was a venue or a road I wanted to pursue, path I wanted to pursue. Simply because I believed at the time that coaching really was the face-to-face, the one-on-ones, the small groups. I didn't think that was for me. So I kind of blew him off a little bit, and he grabbed a couple of really good instructors early and got him involved and grew this thing well over the last couple of years. And I ran into him at the players this year, and we had dinner. And of course, I think this was a Tuesday night, and we had dinner. And Jeff said to me, he said, "Hey, would you have any interest in this?" And I said, I don't know. I said, I think, for now, I'm still doing this teaching thing, and I'm still doing the one-on-ones. And literally 2 days later, the players ended on a Thursday, and the whole world just came to a stop. Mm-hmm. And Jeff sent me a text and said, how about now? And I said, it appears my calendar has just opened up a little bit. Maybe I can do this. So I pulled the camera out and started shooting some video content for him. And, it's been great. I mean, I've loved every minute of it. I like getting in front of a camera, and I like talking about subjects that I want to talk about. And, I think as I do it more, I get a little bit better at it. Obviously those guys are professionals at it, Jeff and Shaheen and Jeff Pierce, Preston, those guys are fantastic at it. But the more content I shoot, the more comfortable I get in front of the camera, the more fun I think it is. It's grown the online side of instruction for me quite a bit. So it's been great. I've loved every minute of it.
Well, I think that's really interesting too, is that if you're good at the online content, you're able to discern what is, in my opinion, a verbiage I might use from time to time is information can be vitaministic. I don't even know if that's a word, but I made it up.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. And by that, I mean, if this information is consumed by large numbers of people, it's probably going to help a lot of people, and it's not going to hurt anybody. That's the way a vitamin works. When you take it, your body uses it if it needs that vitamin, but if it doesn't, it dispenses that vitamin out the other side. And it really is the way golf instruction through that medium needs to be. I think that's why it's difficult to do it well, giving a vitaministic message that's going to help mass numbers of golfers. And that one-on-one approach a lot of times is more prescription drugs. To me, that's where I've lived most of my life as a golf coach, is in that world of prescription, dispensing of information that's only applicable to that golfer in front of me, from my own opinion, at least, and experience at that time. And that's why I've steered away from it. But I think it's really interesting that you guys have approached it and are doing a really good job with it. So I highly recommend my listeners take advantage of your content and your information, because it'll only help them. It's really, really good information.
I think so too.
Yeah, and it's difficult because the World Wide Web as it is today is a massive amount of information, and some of it maybe not necessarily applicable to that golfer that gets on there and goes down the rabbit hole in search of the next secret. So I definitely recommend.
Absolutely, and with this pandemic, right, that we've all been kind of thrust in a situation where we have a lot of time, and there's certainly been a kind of an influx of information, through all the social media and YouTube and internet and Instagram, the whole deal. So there's definitely a flood of information coming from a lot of different directions. And I think what I like so much about Course Kings is the way it's organized and presented, so it's very, very digestible for the consumer.
Yeah, the common, thing a golfer's trying to do, if they're a high handicapper and they've just started, they probably slice the golf ball. So they'll go on the internet and go into Google and search for "fix my slice." Well, the golfer doesn't realize there's a lot of different ways to slice a golf ball, and a lot of different types of slices. I mean, there's a slice where the face is left of the target. There's a slice where the face is to the right of the target. A lot of different ways to slice a ball, and not just one way to fix it. So that's the danger there. So in getting that information correct to that golfer, it's always going to be a challenge, but certainly the way you guys are doing it, I think, is the best way to do it through that medium. So Good job, man. Good job. So tell me a little bit about your competitive career. Are you playing at all, or do you get out and play in some of the local events in your section, or do you just spend most of your time teaching and don't play?
Yeah, so I mean, I liked. We all got into it, I think, because we loved to play. Right? There's no doubt we all wanted to play. This was an avenue for us to play more, beyond the scholastic, the college and high school level. And as I've gotten older, and relatively speaking, I've gotten older. And, we've got an 11-month-old now, and, my wife and I and our 11-month-old, priorities change a little bit, and I still love to play. And, I get a chance. I've actually played quite a bit last year, not competitively, but just, in, playing lessons with students. And then 2020 came around, and, I was getting really busy, and, we didn't have some great weather in January and February here in Florida. Didn't play all that much, and then was traveling quite a bit. So I played one, and then of course the world ended, So I played one time in 2020, but I still like to hit balls, and I like to practice, and I try to squeeze in a session when I can. But I haven't had a chance to play all that much. And then when you're not playing all that much, playing competitively doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, but for me, honestly, my priorities have changed, not only, having a family, but my enjoyment now in the game is more derived from helping others than it is playing. And some may agree or may disagree with that sentiment, but I much rather be on the lesson tee, with somebody, trying to help them get better, because I just find that more enjoyable now than actually playing the game a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've had one experience in the last year of my life where playing was extremely fun. I got to go to Ireland last August with one really, really close friend that I've had for a very long time, and introduced me to two other guys that he was friends with along on that trip, and they've become friends since then for life. But that was a really special experience for me as far as playing. But other than that, playing is not that fun for me. I mean, it's okay. I enjoy it, but I'm like you. I'd much rather be teaching and helping somebody else. So I think it's just a matter of who you are and where your priorities are. But, yeah, I hear it both ways, and I'm kind of like you in that regard. So playing is fun, but you got an 11-month-old, so you got a real good excuse to not go play golf, my friend. And she's probably changing your world quite a bit. Talk to us about that adjustment for you as a dad, being a new dad like that. What are your big challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. Like you said earlier, my wife and I met at Campbell University. Our daughter is named Campbell after Campbell University.
Yeah, I thought that's a cool story.
Yeah, and she's awesome. She'll be one here in the next 2 weeks. She's got teeth coming in, and she got mobile overnight about 2 weeks ago. She went from just sitting there, and she could sit all day during the day and just play with her toys, and all of a sudden you blink and she's in a different room. So that's been a little bit more challenging. And my wife works from home. She has since we've moved to Jacksonville. So about 6 months now she's worked from home. But now that she's mobile and she's much more active, and she takes fewer naps, and she's awake now more during the day, it's harder for my wife to manage her job and this this little kid. So for me, it's been great. I mean, I still go to the club, and in the last couple of weeks I've been at the club more than normal, but pre-pandemic, it would be about 30 to 40 hours at the golf club, and I get to set my own schedule. So I try to be here when she wakes up at about 5 a.m. and try to be home before she goes to bed at 6. So it's been great, and it certainly put things into perspective about what's important and how I want to spend my time. Everything we do now is not with my wife nor myself in mind. It's with how is this going to benefit Campbell, and what can we do to better her life.
Yeah, that's great. So you think she'll be a golfer? You got a plastic club in her hand yet?
We don't have a club for her. Titleist is really great. They sent us her first Foot Joys. They sent her some golf balls with her name on it and her weight and birth and birth date. And, she, if she wants to play golf, that'd be great. I mean, I think she comes to the club, and, my wife and my daughter get to have lunch with me at the club every once in a while. And, we live a mile from the course, and the club is great as far as letting us use the facilities. And when my daughter's old enough, she can go hang out there. And my wife and Campbell will use the pool, and hopefully get her in some of our junior programs. But I don't know if I want her to sample all the sports. I want her to be a good athlete, and I want her to figure out for herself what she loves to do and what she wants to play. But there'll definitely be a golf background for her. If she wants to go that route, I mean, she's already kind of got, a little head start on that side, but yeah, whatever she wants to do.
Well, it makes me smile to hear you talk like that, because you're obviously a very in-tune dad. You're going to make great pop, and she's got a great place to grow up there with you and your wife taking that approach. So many golf professionals sometimes, they push the game on their kids, and I probably did that a little bit, and then you kind of back off and you go, wait a minute, let them figure out if they love it or not, because they won't do it for very long if they don't love it. So, that's great. Good way to be.
I think, yeah. I mean, you would know. I mean, right? We've all taught really highly competitive juniors, and we've seen parents be really, really tough on their kids at times. And there's a burnout level, for kids that are really highly skilled, and they get to a point where they just don't want to do it anymore. They don't find enjoyment in it. And I kind of got that way with soccer a little bit when I was a kid, and it was never thrust on me where my parents forced me to do it. I just fell out of love with the game because it became too much work at a young age. And I think it's great for kids to sample sports. I don't want her to specialize in anything in particular. I want her to try a lot of different things and a lot of different sports, and just become a well-rounded athlete if she wants to play sports. And then if she wants to decide later on, let her pick and let her go whatever she wants to do.
Right. And it might not be sports if she wants to do it all. And
right.
And you're ready for that as a parent. So certainly that's the possibility. They may choose to be something other than an athlete, and that's okay, because happy is what we want as parents, I think, for our kids, and their own successes will make them happy. So,
right.
Great conversation today, TJ. I really appreciate you taking time out to join us, and under the circumstances, I hope things continue to improve for you there in Jacksonville and the world around, and we can kind of get back to what we do in a face-to-face environment. Are you going to try and travel with some of your players there as they start back into the competitive arena here? I understand that's going to happen in your neck of the woods around June there with the Corn Ferry Tour picking up at TPC Sawgrass, from what I understand correctly. You going to be able to travel some?
Yeah, so I haven't heard anything from the tour about player support being allowed or not allowed to go to these events. And being Corn Ferry is a little different than the PGA Tour because there's such small fan attendance at these events that I can't imagine social distancing would be an issue. But if they allow me to go, I mean, you're right. We've got Sawgrass just down the road. We practice there on Mondays when Atlantic Beach is closed. It's about 20 minutes from here. So we got two events at TPC, and then we've got an event down at the King and the Bear down in St. Augustine, which is about 40 minutes or so from here. So, hopefully the tour allows player support, and, hopefully I can get out there and hang out with some of the players. But if not, we're doing some good work here and hopefully just trying to get ready for those events and get off to a good start once the season gets going again.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Well, I tell you what, man, good luck to you and your players and your continued success and all the coaching you're doing there and the online content as well with the Course Kings. And just want to thank you again for being with us this morning, man. It's been a great conversation. Tell our listeners how they can reach out to you and say hello, and how do you like to communicate with folks if they want to connect to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at TJ Yeaton Golf, and Instagram also at TJ Yeaton Golf, TJYEATON Golf. And then they can always, shoot me an email at tjyeaton@yahoo.com.
Very good. Listen, do that, listeners. Reach out to TJ and connect. If you're ever in the Jacksonville, Florida area, be a great stop, and you can hang out with somebody who's probably one of the brightest minds in the game right now, and get some information to help you. This has been our show, The Forecast. I'm thankful again to TJ Yeaton for joining us. Listeners, appreciate you tuning in. It means a lot to me that you give a listen to our show. And we can ever help you. You know how to reach us. I'm Allen Burton, and this has been The Forecast.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.